Most people don't lose respect for you because you're cruel. They lose it because you're too kind. It doesn't sound fair, but that's how it works. That's the paradox no one prepares you for. That sometimes the more you give, the less they see you. The more you sacrifice, the more they forget there was ever anything to lose. You were taught to be the good one, to please, to calm the room, to earn love by being easy to love. You learned early that approval feels safest when you're not making waves. So you smiled, you agreed. You carried the weight no one saw and then apologized for slowing down when your hands started to shake, and it worked. They liked you. You were helpful, reliable. You didn't take up space. You didn't challenge the rhythm. You became the one who could be counted on not to need anything. But that's not a compliment, that's an erasure. Because slowly they stopped asking if you were okay. They stopped thanking you. They started assuming, expecting. You became a background character in your own story, quietly applauded for your absence. And here's the truth that hurts. You trained them to treat you that way, not out of malice, out of fear. Out of the belief that if you were just good enough, small enough, kind enough, they would stay. They would see you. They would value you. But value doesn't come from disappearance. And the more they leaned on you, the more invisible you became. You told yourself it was noble, that love meant sacrifice. That kindness meant putting yourself last, but that's not kindness, that's performance. And every time you said yes to avoid conflict, every time you downplayed your needs, every time you let something go without speaking, you made a silent promise, I'll disappear if it means you'll stay. But they didn't stay. Or if they did, they stopped looking. Because when you never draw a line, people forget there ever was one. This is the part they don't tell you about kindness. That if it's not backed by clarity, by boundaries, by the willingness to risk disapproval, it loses its weight, it becomes noise, it becomes expected, it becomes ignored. And when that happens, you're left wondering why they stopped caring. But maybe the better question is, why did you? They were trying to warn you. Not with advice, with stories. There's a tale from West Africa about a hunter who finds a crocodile stranded on the riverbank. The creature begs for help, promises gratitude, and the hunter, moved by pity, lifts the heavy beast onto his shoulders and carries it back to the water. And as soon as it's safe, the crocodile turns and snaps its jaws shut around the man. The hunter pleads, "You said you'd be grateful." The crocodile replies, "I am what I am, you should have known." And maybe you did. Maybe something in you sensed it when they only called you when they needed something. When they praised your loyalty but never protected your peace. When they smiled while taking from you again and again. But you told yourself it was fine, that helping was the right thing. That being good was the goal, that people would see your heart and honor it. And you weren't wrong for wanting that, but you were wrong to think it would protect you. Oscar Wilde told a similar story. In The Happy Prince, a gilded statue watches the suffering of the city and begins giving away his treasures. His gold leaf, the sapphires from his eyes, everything of beauty he possesses, asking a swallow to deliver it all to the poor. Piece by piece he becomes bare. And when he's no longer beautiful, the townspeople tear him down. They say he's no longer useful, they throw him away. It's just a story, but it's also real. Because you've been there, you've given until you had nothing left. You stripped yourself of joy, energy, time, sleep, peace, thinking it would be enough. Thinking someone would notice, but they didn't notice. They only got used to it. They forgot the version of you that sparkled. And when the gold was gone, when the kindness became routine, when the yeses lost their shine, they looked at you like a stranger. You became replaceable. And here's the moment where too many people drop off, not just in a video, but in life. Right here, when I realize they've been giving for years and the world barely blinked. But you can't look away now, because this isn't where the story ends. This is where it turns. Because the stories weren't written to make you bitter. They were written to help you remember that your value was never in how much you gave away. It was in what you protected. Your time, your spirit, your voice. And no matter how much you've given, that part of you, your worth remains untouched. And you are allowed from this moment on to stop being the hunter, the statue, the offering. You are allowed to be the story that changes. It didn't start as kindness, it started as fear. Fear of being left, fear of being seen. Fear that if you ever truly asked for what you needed, they'd walk away. So instead you offered yourself in pieces, in small, silent compromises that no one noticed, until you were nothing but the person who never asked for anything. You didn't call it survival. You called it being nice. But your nervous system knew better. Psychologists call it the fawn response. When fight feels dangerous, flight feels impossible, and freeze feels helpless, you fawn. You please, you caretake. You say yes to everything, even when it hurts, because being agreeable feels safer than being authentic. And people love you for it. They say you're loyal, generous, the one who never complains. They celebrate your selflessness while consuming your energy like it's bottomless. They keep coming back, not because they respect your boundaries, but because you've convinced them you don't have any. You taught them that you're always available, always agreeable, always fine. And then one day, you're not. But by then, it's too late. They've built an entire dynamic around your disappearance. You wonder why they stopped treating you well. But the harder truth is this: they never had to. And not because they're cruel, but because you never required them to see you. This is what happens when kindness becomes currency. When you give without asking, hoping it will one day come back around. But unreciprocated giving isn't generosity, it's quiet self-abandonment. And over time, it teaches others that your needs are negotiable. You think you're being nice, but niceness without boundaries becomes a permission slip for mistreatment. And if you don't course correct, it always ends the same way. You burn out, you lash out, you disappear completely, emotionally, socially, even physically. And they stand there shocked, confused, wondering why you changed. But you didn't change, you just stopped hiding. That's why the performance of perpetual kindness is so dangerous. Because when you live behind the mask long enough, you forget it's a mask at all. You begin to believe that your silence is who you are. But your soul knows better. You were never meant to be endlessly accommodating. You were never meant to be everyone's emotional support structure. You were never meant to be the one who disappears so others feel safe. You were meant to be whole. There's a study from the University of Notre Dame that found agreeable people, those who avoid conflict, always say yes and prioritize others, earn significantly less over time than their more assertive peers. Not because they lack value, but because they don't insist on being valued. That isn't humility, that's self-erasure. And the longer you stay quiet, the more others believe your silence is comfort, but silence isn't comfort. It's where your real voice goes to die. Carl Jung said that the brighter the light we show the world, the darker the shadow we hide. And for those who live to be kind, that shadow runs deep. You build your identity around being the good one, the patient one, the one who forgives, who never offends, who never needs. But beneath that glow of endless kindness, something stirs, a quiet rage, a hidden grief, a long-forgotten part of you that remembers what it feels like to be unmet, unchosen, unseen. You think you've outgrown those feelings, but you haven't. You've just buried them. And the psyche does not forget what you repress, it compensates. Jung called this shadow compensation. The more you cling to a virtuous mask, the more pressure builds behind it. Until one day the mask cracks. You snap over something small, you retreat suddenly. Or you implode in exhaustion and can't understand why, but your shadow understands. It has waited for you to notice. That moment you said, "I'm fine," while silently begging to be heard. That moment you smiled while someone took more than they gave. That moment you accepted less again and again just to prove you were good. The danger isn't that people take advantage of your kindness. It's that you let them, because being kind has become your shield, your justification, your identity. But identity built on denial is fragile, and Jung knew this. He wrote about the martyr complex, the unconscious drive to suffer in silence, to be needed at all costs, to find moral superiority in sacrifice. But martyrdom doesn't earn love, it earns dependency. It attracts those who want the benefit of your strength without the burden of your truth. And eventually you become the emotional dump site for those who never learn to carry their own weight. This is how respect erodes. Not in grand betrayals, but in the quiet daily moments when your yes is assumed and your no is feared. Because when you never show your edge, people stop believing you have one. When you hide your anger, it doesn't disappear, it just turns inward. When you pretend to be fine, they stop asking if you're okay. This is what Jung meant when he warned against inflation of the persona, the danger of becoming so attached to your image that you lose contact with your core. And when that happens, the world may love you, but they don't know you. And worse, neither do you. Individuation, in Jung's language, is the process of reuniting with the lost parts of yourself, not to become selfish, but to become real. To say, "I am kind," yes, but I am not endlessly available. I am soft, but I am not passive. I give, but I also receive. And if that makes you uncomfortable, so be it. Because real kindness doesn't come from fear, it comes from clarity. And when people feel that clarity in you, they change. They hesitate, they listen. Not because they fear you, but because they finally see you. Not as the one who never breaks, but as someone whole enough to be soft and strong. And when they see that version of you, the one with the mask removed, the shadow reclaimed, they don't disrespect it, they respect it. Because now there is no doubt your kindness is not a currency, it's a choice. And that choice is no longer for sale. You believed that if you were kind enough, they'd stay. That if you gave more, tolerated more, softened more, they would see you, value you, love you, but they didn't. Because the truth is hard, people don't always respect kindness, especially when it's unconditional. Especially when it comes without limits. Especially when it's used to hide the one thing they need to see, your backbone. You weren't wrong to love. But you were taught the wrong terms, that love means self-sacrifice, that boundaries are barriers. That saying no is selfish. That it's your job to carry the weight, so others never feel it. But that's not love, that's role play. And the role you were cast in was the nice one, the emotional fixer. The one who smooths things over, holds the tension, absorbs the damage, smiles anyway. But kindness isn't always good. Sometimes it becomes the reason they stop listening, the reason they stop checking in, the reason they stop treating you like a person and start treating you like a service. Pema Chodron called it idiot compassion. The habit of choosing comfort over truth, of saying yes because it's easier than confrontation, of protecting others from discomfort at the cost of your own dignity. You say yes not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. And that fear is exactly what robs your kindness of its power. Because real kindness doesn't come from avoidance, it comes from choice, from presence, from the ability to say no when it matters and to mean it. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this too. He said, "I've laughed at those who thought themselves good because they had no claws." That line cuts deep. Because maybe your goodness hasn't been strength, it's been absence. The absence of boundaries, the absence of confrontation. The absence of anything that might risk being seen as difficult. But here's the paradox. The more they get used to your yes, the less it means. And the more you disappear into generosity, the more they forget you exist outside of it. You've seen it happen. You've been the friend who's always available until suddenly they stop checking in. You've been the partner who gives endlessly until they expect it as a rule, not a gift. You've been the worker who never complains until the workload triples and no one bats an eye. It wasn't malice, it was momentum. And you helped build it. Because when you always offer the rose and never show the thorn, people stop being careful with their hands. This is where too many people stop listening to themselves. They blame others for taking too much, not realizing they never said enough. But this is the turning point, right here. When you remember that boundaries aren't walls, they're definitions. They tell people where you begin. They tell people that your time is valuable, your energy is finite, and your love isn't permission to take you for granted. Kindness isn't about being easy, it's about being honest. And honesty will always ask more of you than silence ever will. You will lose people. But what you gain is worth everything. Self-respect, clarity, and the kind of peace that doesn't depend on being liked. You're not cruel for protecting your energy. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. You're just finally learning that love without limits isn't love, it's erasure. You thought your kindness would protect you. That if you were gentle enough, forgiving enough, patient enough, they would never leave. But kindness without limits doesn't protect you, it exposes you. It tells the world, here is someone who won't say no. Here is someone who will bleed quietly. Here is someone who will carry it all, just to be kept. And for a while they do keep you. But not because they see you, because they know you won't leave. Until one day, you do. Maybe not with a scream. Maybe not with a door slammed shut. Maybe just with a pause. A breath, a decision. And that's where everything begins to change. Because now your kindness is no longer a reaction, it's a choice. It's no longer a mask. It's a muscle, strong, selective, alive. Carl Jung called it individuation, the moment you become whole. When you stop dividing your soul into acceptable pieces. When you stop giving yourself away in exchange for belonging. When you realize that love isn't earned by erasing yourself. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. And sometimes being real means disappointing people, losing people. Letting them think you've become cold, when really you've just become honest. You don't need to be cruel. You don't need to retaliate. You just stop offering what you no longer have to give. You stop bleeding for those who would never bandage you. You stop filling cups that never once turned back to fill yours. And what's left isn't emptiness. It's clarity. You start speaking in full sentences again. You start telling the truth again. You say, no, I can't. No, not this time. No, not like that. And the people who only knew you as easy may fall away. Let them. They weren't in love with you. They were in love with your compliance. But the ones who stay, the ones who arrive after, they meet someone else entirely. Someone who still gives, but no longer from fear. Someone who still loves, but no longer at their own expense. Someone who still shows up, but only when showing up is sacred, not expected. This is what happens when you take your shadow back. When you stop pretending that gentleness must come without teeth. When you learn to be kind and still carry claws, not to attack, but to protect, not to destroy, but to defend the peace you've finally claimed as your own. Simone Weil once wrote, "Compassion directed toward oneself is true humility." Because when you include yourself in your kindness, you stop needing to prove it. You stop overextending. You stop apologizing. You stop collapsing into the shape others find most convenient, and you start standing. Not as the unbreakable, not as the flawless, not as the forever yes, but as the real, with edges, with voice, with dignity. And the next time someone asks for more than you can give, you don't panic, you don't shrink, you just smile and say no. Because this time your love has roots. This time your softness is shielded. This time they don't just love you because you're kind, they respect you because you finally are. And if you've ever felt unseen in your kindness, if you've ever disappeared inside it, tell your story, leave it below. Someone else needs to know they're not alone, and maybe that someone is you.